This is Jim Bish with the Americans in Wartime Museum. Today's date is May 19th, 2019, and I am in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And I'm conducting an interview with Scott Coulson, and he is from Yorktown, Virginia.
That's correct.
Scott, could you please give me your full name and where you were born?
Scott Alexander Coulson in Portsmouth, Virginia.
Locally?
Mm-hmm. Portsmouth Naval Hospital.
Okay. And what war or conflicts did you participate in?
I was in both Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom in Kuwait and Afghanistan.
Okay.
And OIF in Baghdad.
Okay. Did you grow up in Portsmouth?
No, I did not. Father was in the Army, so we moved around a good bit. I essentially grew up, though, from about 11 on in Woodbridge, Virginia, up north.
I taught at Woodbridge Senior High School for 35 years.
Graduated from Woodbridge Senior High School in 1986.
Really? That's the first year I was there. 85, 86.
Wow, classic.
Yeah. Could talk about a lot of
Okay.
people that time frame.
We'll definitely have to catch up after the interview.
Yeah. I went there in 85 and I retired in 2015. But besides that, so your father was military.
Yeah.
How was he? He'd been in the service for a long time then.
Yeah. He was a West Point graduate and retired as a lieutenant colonel after 23 years.
Okay.
So he retired right around the time I graduated. Actually, when did he retire? In 80, a little before 80. I don't remember, 85, 84, something like that.
Yeah, there were a lot of military officers, kids going through Woodbridge at that time.
Yeah.
How did you find, after you graduated from high school, where did you find yourself?
Well,
did you find yourself?
As you can see on my hat, I'm a graduate of the Pennsylvania State University, and a fairly proud one at that. And I went through the ROTC program there. I was commissioned an armor officer. I was assessed into the reserve branch without an active duty appointment, and didn't really know what I was going to do with myself. So after about 6 months of beating around as a civilian, I got a postcard that said, "Please call the following number at US Arperson to schedule yourself a slot at Armor Officer Basic." Wound up going through Armor Officer Basic, and in the very last class that had a program called the Commandant's Program to bring the best 2 reserve officers onto active duty, and I went in with the specific personal mission to win one of those appointments, and I was the top reserve guy in the class.
It's very impressive. Where was the school at?
Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Fort Knox?
Yeah.
And how long was that?
AOB?
Okay.
4 months, I think. Yeah, ish. 3 or 4 months. So showed up in November of 90 and graduated in March of 91. So I was literally in the school in Armor Officer Basic with my letter on a yes, I'll volunteer to go to the desert when Operation, the Desert Storm occurred.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that was right there. You were wrapping up just time while that was getting
Exactly.
ramped up.
Yep.
So, from school, how did that process go when you found yourself over to the Middle Eastern deserts?
Well, I'd been a lieutenant in Korea, and then I served in the came back from Korea, served in the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment out in Texas. So I had a lot of background on tanks and armored vehicles. But by the time 9/11 occurred, I had matriculated through company command. I'd been a tank company commander at Fort Hood, Texas, and I was serving on the 3rd Army staff in Fort McPherson, Georgia, when 9/11 happened. And I was selected about 2 weeks after 9/11 to be the aide-de-camp to the deputy commanding general there. And the next thing I knew, I was in the Middle East. We started out, he and I, going over to Bright Star, which was an already planned exercise with the Egyptians that happened in November of 2000. And then 2001, sorry. 9/11 was 2001. And then from Bright Star, we moved directly to Camp Doha in Kuwait and began supporting the operations of the Special Forces Command that would then become Operation Enduring Freedom. We're doing logistics and stuff from Kuwait, supporting the guys that were initially flown into Afghanistan. And working with General Strautman, I actually I can show you a photograph of Bagram Airfield in January of that year. So, 4 months after 9/11.
Yeah, January 2002.
Yeah.
So you were in for about 10 years by the time all that began to unravel.
Yeah, that's correct.
And most of the time in the States.
Prior to that, yeah, I'd been on a deployment to Bosnia. I did a peacekeeping operation in Bosnia. It was kind of neat because it overlapped with, I was stationed there and part of 1st Cavalry Division, just outside of Tuzla, when the whole operation in Kosovo kicked off. So I'm one of very few American soldiers who's actually sought cover from a potential real enemy air raid at one point in time before the Air Force shot down all the MiGs. So it was kind of interesting. Obviously nothing happened, but
What time frame were you over in Bosnia?
That was 99.
99.
Yeah, I was in company command, a tank company from Fort Hood, Texas. We deployed the whole company over, did peacekeeping operations for 6 months, and then came back. So,
as you could you explain a little bit about what your day-to-day role was in Iraqi freedom and
I guess the most interesting part, I did a full. As a staff officer, I'll tell you an interesting thing that didn't get recorded for history that I really want it on the record that I did, because it's something cool I got assigned to do.
That's what this is for.
So, I was the major in the Coalition Forces Land Component Command, which is the Land Component Command of CENTCOM at that time, the 3-star general in charge of the actual invasion of Iraq for OIF-1. And I was part of the planning staff, but I was a really junior major, so they didn't let me do all the really sexy planning stuff.
Yeah.
And they put me in future operations. And what we did is we wrote fragos. We wrote fragmentary orders that told various and sundry people what to do. A lot of different coordinations have to happen at that level. And it was almost time to invade Iraq. I mean, we're going through rehearsals, we're doing all this stuff. And I asked my boss, I said, hey boss, who's gonna write the invasion order? He says, we've already written the invasion order. It's called Cobra 2. Everybody knows about it. It's the big O plan. I says, no, that's a plan. That says, if I open that up and look at the beginning, there's a mission statement. It says, someday, perhaps maybe, if we are told to, invade Iraq and do the following things. I'm pretty sure that the commander of 5th Corps and the commander of 1st Marine Expeditionary Force, those generals, would like an order on a piece of paper that says that they are now directed to invade a foreign country. He said, you're right, go write it. And I said, cool. So I actually wrote the fragmentary order that, for signature by the general, that converted O-Plan Cobra 2 from big 2,000-page plan to a 2,000-page operations order that said on the following date, I don't remember the exact date time group anymore, but on the following date, Commander of 1st Marine Expeditionary Force, Commander 5th U.S. Corps, invade the sovereign nation of Iraq, overthrow the regime of Saddam Hussein in order to create conditions conducive to American foreign policy goals in the region. That was kind of cool when I got to do that. But the only change my boss made was take my name off the bottom and put his name on it. It was kind of aggravating. So
you wrote the plan, but he wrote the.
No, I didn't write the plan. I wrote the order. It's just a little piece of it. But it was, and it was just a task. It was another thing that needed to get done.
Yeah.
But there's a history book that thick on Operation Cobra 2 titled Cobra 2. I'm not in it. It's kind of aggravating. But, it's not that big a deal.
So when that unfolded, what was your job after the operation?
Well,
unfolding and actually.
I was not on there. They had a deployable headquarters, and I was a fairly eager kind of guy. I was not on the deployable headquarters, and that kind of bothered me. So another requirement to write a frago came in that said, we need to go support ORHA. What the hell is ORHA? The Organization for Reconstruction Humanitarian Assistance. It was led by, what was the guy's name? General Garner, retired General Garner. And President Bush had appointed him to be the first coalition guy in Baghdad to help run the country. And we had to write a frago to support that. I said, okay, let's see, what kind of support will CFLIC provide? CFLIC will provide a liaison team consisting of one major operations officer, 2 NCOs and a driver and, appropriate communications gear, blah, blah, blah. I walked it in, handed it to the same boss, took my name off the thing. I said, here you go, boss, sign this. He signed it. I said, bye, see you. I'm going to Baghdad. So I packed up two NCOs and a specialist and a Humvee and some camo gear and went to Baghdad. And that's how I wound up in the Saddam Hussein's palace downtown about 2-3 weeks after the invasion.
You wrote your own order.
I did.
Where you
I wrote my own order to get me the heck out of Kuwait. It's kind of fun.
So you went to from there. You went to Baghdad.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit of arrival and how you ended up in.
Baghdad. I'll get to there's a real Baghdad story later on, but I mean, the Baghdad back then was interesting because we didn't know much about, we hadn't been functioning as an army at war, so there was a lot of discovery learning going on. There were still fighting going on in the city when we got there. Here and there were still things that used to be people and things of that nature that had not been cleaned up, and we're in the process of getting cleaned up. We didn't know where to go, so we went to the Republican Palace downtown. We got told that's where the organization for the ORHA is going to be based. So we went in there and established some living quarters in the palace.
I'm assuming that it was fairly secure at that point. Where you were.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. I think I'd been there about a month, and we actually got up the gumption to go do some, put on some PTs and go running. Believe it or not, because what was going to eventually be known as the Green Zone was the secure area downtown, and that was even then fairly secure. I did hear a bullet go wicking past my head once while I was out running, but it was an emotionally interesting moment then. But compared to 05, 06, it wasn't all that in a bag of chips.
Yeah. So how long were you in Baghdad?
About 4 months. I was there when John Paul Bramer arrived and took over from Garner and established the Coalition Provisional Authority, which has since come under such scrutiny and been blamed for a large amount of the problems that we had back then. And I tend to agree with some of those criticisms. I don't think it was very well organized or very well thought out. It was a little bit dismaying for a junior major to be operating at that level and discover that we really didn't have, outside of the United States Army, a plan for what to do in this nation after we achieved the destruction of its armed forces and the capitulation and dismemberment of its government and services. In a country where over 50% of the employed populace worked for the government prior to our invasion, eliminating the government would be, we needed to be Johnny on the spot, and we were not. It's disappointing.
A plan to rebuild and have people doing something positive right away.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's. So you were there about four months, you said?
Yeah.
And how did things change from the time you first got there until the time that you left there?
Well, when we first got there, we had intended to, one of the things that was in the order that I wrote was one of the coordinating instructions said all U.S. forces will be out of the nation of Iraq within 75 days of the day we kick this thing off. And of course, that was rescinded when we did not find Saddam Hussein or clear evidence of chemical weapons. And so what had been intended to be the Organization for Reconstruction Humanitarian Assistance was not it was not a U.S. government entity. It was intended to bring together reconstruction teams and other non-governmental organizations, NGOs and stuff to support the country putting itself back together again. And of course that didn't really happen. We wound up taking over the show and trying unsuccessfully, in my opinion, to put the country back together again. I remember we took a trip out to Bayap Airport, and I can show you a photograph somewhere I've got of me with a box, because we're trying to figure out how to pay all the people of Iraq, so we're shipping in money. And I'm holding a box about the size of that thing full of $20 bills. I got $1.2 million in cash in my arms that I'm helping load into an armored vehicle for transport. Pretty interesting. But coming back from that trip to the airport was the first IED attack I ever came upon. About a mile, 2 miles in front of us, a Humvee got hit by one of the very early IEDs as the insurgency was just kicking off, and pretty sure a soldier lost his life in that attack. And I'll never forget the Mark 19 ammo on board that vehicle cooking off. We could hear the grenades going off as the vehicle burned down. As an up-armored, or not an up-armored, a regular Humvee. Yeah. But it's pretty bad.
And you were about a mile from there when that occurred.
Yeah. But I mean, that was pretty much right before I left, and so it was, just the beginning of the transition from a time of chaos to organized resistance. It's kind of in that transitional period. When we were all reading about looting and all the problems on the TV, and it was starting to get to, hey, this is more than just a few holdouts fighting against the Americans. This is beginning to look like an organized resistance.
Mm-hmm. And when you were towards the end of your 4 months there, was there a big focus on trying to find Saddam at that point yet? Or What was the
Yes,
focus on?
but no. The focus where I was I mean, because again, I'm in the CPA headquarters. I'm conducting liaison with Third Army, the CFLIC, and at that point it was standing up services, getting governmental functions reestablished, making the banks work, making food and medical work, making power work, restoring the industrial function of getting oil back online. That was sort of a longer term thing, but all of those efforts were ongoing at that time in their infancy, and that's kind of what was being parsed about. But also the dealing with the Kurds and the political ramifications of that, flipping the entire dichotomy of the country on its head and putting the Shia in charge over top of the Sunnis, where the Sunnis had been in charge before of the government and everything, and the de-Baathification and the complete destruction of the military. That was all kind of still going on.
There's a lot of levels of stuff there.
A lot of levels.
Rebuild the infrastructure, trying to rebuild a social structure that was different from before, the political structure rebuilt different. That it sounds like there was a lot of things happening there. That so why or how did you? What was the process of you leaving there?
I went to BIAP. I got on a plane and I left. I'm trying to remember. I don't remember the genesis of the redeployment orders. I don't quite recall. I know I came back. Do
you know why you were redeployed, or
time to go? I mean, I'd been over there for like 17 months in a row or something like that. I'd been there a while, and I went back home. Did a little bit of work in Third Army headquarters in Atlanta. Got reunited with my wife. Great flight home. I could show you a picture of me on a Delta Airlines 767 on a contract flight out of the country, because at that time we're still doing the George Bush on the aircraft carrier and all the hey we won kind of stuff. It was a pretty happy time. Front page of the Atlanta Constitution newspaper when I got back. I got my photograph saying hi to my son and my wife above the fold on that newspaper. Kind of neat. But it wound up going back for the transition from OAF 1 to OAF 2, and I don't think that was more than 6 or 8 weeks. And I think I'm trying to remember if I went to Baghdad or if I just stayed in Kuwait. I don't quite recall. But once that transition was over, I came back, and then it was time as a major to transition off to school. So I took the family and we moved to Leavenworth, Kansas for Commander General Staff College. And I did CGSC.
When was that?
That would have been 04. Yeah. I was at CGSC in 04. So I guess I was probably going to CGSC and I don't remember when the exact OAF 1 to OAF 2 transition occurred. I want to say by the March of 04 I was out of country and on my way back home, and then off to after the transition I was off to Leavenworth.
So you were in Leavenworth for 6 months?
It's 1 year. It's a 1 year class, yeah. And then from there I went to 4th Infantry Division at Fort Hood, Texas. And that was
So that was probably 05?
Yeah, that was 05. We did about a 6-month train up, and then we left for Baghdad. Got to Baghdad I got there in late November of 05, early December of 05, somewhere in there, and I was in country through December of 06.
So you were there 16?
No, 13 months. Yeah, ish, yeah. Might have been 12.
Where were you at in Baghdad? You went back to Baghdad?
Yeah, so by then there was the green zone, which we called the international zone. I was at FOB Prosperity initially. Our brigade was tasked with the security of the green zone, as well as the security of about half of Baghdad. And I was the brigade plans officer and worked a lot with the transition plan and process to take over from the brigade that was there. And so we would assume all of the missions and stuff. And then about halfway through that deployment, a little bit ahead of halfway through, I was selected to go down and become the operations officer of our cavalry squadron, 810 Cav, 8th Squadron, 10th U.S. Cavalry. That was in 4th Brigade Combat Team, 4th Infantry Division, which at that time was part of was the multinational division headquarters for Baghdad. And we started out at FOB Falcon in southern Baghdad, and then after I'd been there about a month, we moved to FOB Liberty, which is actually on the east side of Baghdad International Airport. What was known as the big FOB there was called Victory, and the Liberty was on the right side, a little smaller FOB part of it.
When you first arrived in Baghdad, there that second time around, what was the conditions that you arrived? What was the security level? Was there?
Yeah.
What was
So
the
in order to
situation
get
there
to,
with you?
as an example, I didn't take one, but in order to get to the international zone at that time, people were riding in that big up armored rhinoceros bus thing. The entire route was contested and considered unsafe just to get from the airport to the international zone along Route Irish. The entire city was in the throes of the Sunni versus Shia revolution in concert with continued insurgent activities by both sides against the U.S. forces. I should say against the coalition forces. There were quite a few coalition people there too. So we worked with a few Brits in sector. We definitely worked with the Georgians. They had a battalion of infantry supporting us in the IZ. I'm trying to remember what other coalition partners. Anyway, it was a coalition effort.
Were these are all U.S.-led coalitions? So.
Oh yeah.
So that's the situation. There's a lot of insecure areas.
Yeah. Well, there is no. Yeah, there's only limited secure areas. I mean, you got the major U.S. FOBs by that time were fairly well established, and fighting was constant. I mean, we were,
And so that's the situation you came in on. What was your day-to-day activities?
When I came in as a plans guy, I mean, it was a lot. I was probably doing 19-hour days, probably. I was probably getting about 5 hours of sleep a night.
Mm-hmm.
But I was working pretty much. You didn't have any days off. You didn't do anything else. But yeah, I was working in an office in a half burned out section of what used to be a palace. Because there were a large collection of palaces in there, and we'd cobbled together a headquarters in there. We had a big stadium seating kind of a TOC, Tactical Operations Center for the brigade, and I was doing the planning for the brigade commander and the brigade S3, helping them craft, long-range operations, helping them track and think about and understand what they needed to accomplish in each one of the battalion sectors, trying to figure out who the bad players are over a city with 14 million people or whatever it was in it.
How did you figure out who the bad players were? What were some of the things, the intelligence that you were learning to help you do what you needed to do?
Communications intercepts, a lot of humint, a lot of rumint, the personal observations of the leaders on the ground, discussions with interpreters, discussions with informants, signals intercepts, as well as, I don't want to talk too much. I actually had access to stuff that I can't tell you about, so I don't want to talk about it too much. But we were monitoring a variety of different communications mediums. A lot of it was open source. I mean, a lot of it's like listening to the press, or listening to what people say on street corners, or listening to what they're putting on internet blogs.
It's a different concept back then, because internet, things like that, were coming in on board.
Believe me, the insurgents have been understood the internet for a very long time. By the time 2006 rolled around, their sniper operations in Baghdad, I'll tell you about it in a little bit, they were shooting our guys and filming it and hanging it on the internet. You can still find those videos out there. I can show you videos of our guys getting shot.
Yeah.
Like our guys, like after a guy named, use names? Guy named Lieutenant Drolet was a platoon leader in our outfit after I went down to be the operations officer at 810. And Juba, the Baghdad sniper, the Iraqis created this legend around this legendary sniper figure. Well, it wasn't one guy, it was a collection of dudes, but they were former Iraqi army guys and they knew how to shoot. And they were doing sniper operations inside Baghdad, where they were using a couple of different modified, what we call bongo vans, a flip-up license plate on the back, and they'd have a secret compartment to stash the rifle and gear. And they'd pull up on something and do like the DC sniper guy, Malvo, and that other dude. And they target our guys, let loose with one round, and then pack up and leave. But they'd have a video camera in the upper right-hand corner of the rear windshield filming the whole thing, and then they'd hang it on the internet. And one of our guys got shot. Lieutenant Drolet got shot, and he got shot in the abdomen, so it hit him here. Went through his vest, because that's a soft part of the vest. There's no rifle-resistant plate there, and it went out his left buttock. And of course, the pain when you get shot typically emanates from the exit wound. So he thought he got shot in the ass. He's rolling around holding his butt cheek on the ground. But the sniper filmed it, and hung it on the internet, and we found it and identified and knew who it was. We're like, hey, that's Lieutenant Drolet, when me and the intel officer were watching the video. And he lived. He went to the surgical hospital and got they sorted him out, and it turned out the bullet went through his abdomen and didn't hit anything, didn't hit no vital organs, nothing. So he did come back to the unit. When we had all rotated back stateside, I called him into my office, plugged in a USB stick, and said, all right, watch this. And I showed him a video from the sniper's perspective of him getting shot, which had a little bit of an impact. I think it was kind of neat. And the interesting thing was he hadn't sorted out. He's like, I didn't think he came from that angle. I'm like, hey man, the video doesn't lie, Yeah. And it was pretty interesting seeing the whole. Because you get hit, you don't know what happened. You don't have a real understanding of the event, because you're so traumatized. And it was kind of neat.
That was a very unique war because, every time you have World War I was the first recorded war, World War II, or really Vietnam. The first World War II, they had movie tone news and different things like that, and some shots. But the first real video war being Vietnam, and that was literally Iraqi Freedom was the first internet war. How it was used, and its infancy was growing up during that time. And obviously you were using that as a tool as well to find out information, getting information.
Yep.
What were some of the things that helped you most, do you think, as far as getting information to help you guys plan and do your job, of all those different intel?
I mean, human was considered the most human intelligence. So either informant driven or paid or generated by the special forces or something. But that was usually considered the only thing that was going to have, that you were going to get, that was going to have any purpose or any validity to it. There wasn't enough translation capability for a whole lot of comm intercept intel at our level, so it didn't it didn't always filter down to us. So we get some of it, but now I will say that we had targeted signals-driven missions that we could know something was someplace that would assist us in tracking people down. It was pretty reliable.
Mm-hmm. Did as you were doing your job, how was that unfolding? Were your intelligence and what you're planning was actually succeeding as you went through?
To a degree, and a lot of it was a lot of it depended, quite frankly, on the actual aptitude of the folks involved. Our intelligence officer in our squadron was superb, and we had a couple of different iterations of, hey, I've got this, I've got that, I can put it all together, and he'd bring me all this stuff together, paint a picture, and then we'd build an operation around it. So if you didn't have somebody that was really that skilled and that talented and that dedicated to it, because you read this stuff, it can be boring, it can be mind-numbing to try and figure all this stuff out, and he was very, very skilled and very good at it. Stu Curtis, great guy. Talked to him since, I don't remember where he's at, but he's a really good dude.
So working in cohesive with someone like that, put the operation in.
And we had civil affairs guys. We had MIT teams, so teams of U.S. advisors that were working with the Iraqi army or Iraqi police. We'd get information from them, and we'd plan operations with those guys and work with them. Adjacent units, special forces units sometimes were value added. We didn't always work quite so well with them. There's some friction there, but it tended to sort itself out. Not all the time. I can remember driving around in a Humvee in the middle of the night in Baghdad all night trying to figure out what was going on and why somebody was shooting in my sector, and it turned out to be a Special Forces AC-130 that didn't bother to tell our division headquarters that they were going to be operating in our sector, and we're literally, wondering why explosions are happening all over the place where we're driving. It's kind of interesting.
So you had communications issues?
I would say, not communications, I would say coordination. Coordination issues. Okay. Were a little frustrating at times, but there is some fog of war that attaches to warfare. I mean, a lot more than people imagine. There's never 100% clarity of what's going on.
Yeah. You're there 13 months.
Yeah.
how was the progress throughout those 13 months as far as your job and what you saw? And
Well, so the
how
time
things were
frame
going?
I was there was the lead up. We did a thing called Operation Together Forward, which was the first Together Forward 2. An attempt to shift responsibility for security onto the Iraqi forces, and it was a complete and utter disaster. So they decided to draw down the forces in Baghdad, and our squadron went from owning, being responsible for, owning, we didn't own it, but being responsible for, a section of Baghdad that measured maybe, an eighth or a tenth of the city, to owning half of it. We had 450 total guys. So, and they're not all out on patrol at the same time, They have to return back to the secure area, and a patrol duration could be 2, 4, 6 hours, So it was ridiculous to think that we're going to be able to police or secure an area that's populated with 4, 5, 6 million people, and we're supposed to be assisting in the transition, put the Iraqis in the lead, and it did not work, and it led to what is fairly famous, the General Petraeus initiated surge in 2007 that had a much more significant impact on the people of Iraq and the specifically the insurgency in Baghdad.
Yeah.
But it did not work out well for us.
Right.
Our squadron area expanded to being literally almost half of Baghdad on the western side, and then as they began the surge, when we went to transition out, we shrunk down and shrunk down and shrunk down until we were responsible for only a very small portion of the city. But we never surrendered responsibility for the security of Route Irish, the route in between Baghdad International Airport and the international zone, and we secured that the entire time I was there. And we were very successful in driving down the incidence of attacks and violence along Irish while we were in charge. So it was kind of good.
So the security issues, were they political failures or military failures, or
Both.
they were both in
Both.
unison as far as the problems that evolved from 2003 all the way up to 2007 with the increase in forces being put there?
There's an ongoing, I don't know if revolution's quite the right term, but an ongoing bloodletting going on between Sunni and Shia in the midst of the place. We're driving around and we'll find dead bodies on the side of the road, a Sunni versus Shia or a Shia versus Sunni execution. They just drag a guy out of his house and shoot him in the back of the head and leave him in the middle of the roadway. Or chop off his head, wrap him in saran wrap, and set the head on top of him. We come by and see that. It's disturbing. But then they did, they're perfectly willing to do the same thing to us. They're placing IEDs against us on a daily basis. They were shooting indirect fire at our FOBs. They were sniping at us and stuff. So while they were fighting with each other, they're also fighting with us. The Iraqi army riddled with corruption and infiltrated by the insurgency. Same with the police. Same with the special police. I don't think it's unfair to say it's any of them. While there were plenty of them that were dedicated to their country and their people, who were their people? Every one of them was either Sunni or Shia and had family members or somebody being touched by this violence, and that just continued to drive a cycle of violence that was doing a pretty good job at that time of tearing the country apart.
Yep.
The same sniper that shot Lieutenant Drolet, or probably the same guy anyway, shot me. It was a fairly big story, right? I thought it was fairly significant emotionally to me anyway. So. There was a lot of bad stuff going on. I think I got hit by 4 IEDs on my vehicle.
Could you tell me a little bit about that story, or does that come a little later?
What do you want?
Yeah, go ahead and tell me about that episode.
The sniper episode or the IEDs episode? Because they're both episodes.
Both of them.
Okay.
In a little more detail.
The sniper episode. We were doing a targeted operation. It ran too late. It ran through the night and into the morning. And I got out of... we're breaking down the cordon. We didn't find the guy that we were looking for. They're loading up a couple of Bradley fighting vehicles. We've got another patrol, a supporting element with us in the patrol of up-armored Humvees. I walked over to talk to those guys. I'm speaking with the team leader, in the cracked open door of his Humvee. And I turned to leave, and as I turned, I was struck by a single sniper round. It hit me right here, just below my clavicle, at an angle of about like that. And the angle's important. I'm pretty sure he was aiming for my American flag patch right here, because the snipers knew where our body armor was and shot to avoid it. So if you hit a guy in the shoulder, laterally, it'll go through the shoulder, through your entire chest cavity, heart, everything, and out the other side. It's a very lethal hit. in any case, he was aiming at me, and it struck me here. He's using a Dragunov sniper rifle. I know because I recovered the bullet and got it analyzed by our intel guys. But we have an anti-rifle round plate that probably would have stopped the bullet that was right here in the front. But it was, the plate stopped right about like that. It didn't give coverage to your very upper portion of your chest. So this thing missed the plate and hit me here. But I still had soft body armor here, and miracle of miracles, I was using a high tensile strength aluminum rock climbing carabiner to hold my M4, my carbine, to hold my carbine. Yeah, no kidding. To hold my carbine onto my body armor, so the bullet struck the carabiner full on. And a carabiner is, it's by Black Diamond. It's for rock climbing. It's a pretty strong thing. It's made to save people's lives, just in a totally different way. It hit that thing. It blew up. I got bits and pieces of carabiner hit me in the face, along with some bits of bullet jacket. And then the remainder of the bullet bored into the soft part of the vest right here, which has got 9 layers of Kevlar, and it went through 7 of them and then stopped. And the resultant impact, knocked me ass over tea kettle, gave me a 3rd-degree burn on my chest, about yay big around, bruised from here to here. Basically put me in an extremely unhappy situation for about 3 days. I wasn't able to wear my body armor. I was swollen up and tore up and stuff. But I was okay. I was about the best off you've ever seen a guy that just got shot by a high-powered rifle, so I got no complaints. But I hit the ground, and you go through this mental, but it all happens in your head. You're not actually doing that, and your brain's telling you, hey man, you're probably okay, right? That's the subconscious fight or flight part of your brain saying, you're okay, execute, do something now, fight or flight, right? And the other half of your brain's going, wait, stop, hold on, whoa, time out, need more data. The conscious, rational thinking part is saying, whoa, what makes you think you're okay? And the other part of your brain's going, no, really, you are. So right about the time I decided I was okay, the guys, had a personal security detachment, and they grabbed hold of me, started dragging me across the ground. I'm okay, I can walk. Pulled me over to some cover, and a medic jumped on me. And, you're okay, sir. Are you sure? Yeah, didn't go through. Oh, okay. Feels wet. Yeah, you're tore up a little, but you'll be okay. So I get up and start piecing together what happened. And there's this young mechanic. In a cavalry squadron, we don't have a whole lot of scouts, right? I mean, there's just not that many of them. And so prior to this, the organizational table for our unit did not include a 3-vehicle combat detachment for the operations officer to go out into conduct combat patrols. So my personal security detachment, which I think is just way too glorious a name, it's not my personal security detachment, it's the patrol that I'm attached to, but that's what we called it, PSD, consisted of guys that we got from other jobs all over the squadron. And the guy that had been assigned to me personally was a kid named Marshall, a specialist, and I'm still in touch with him on Facebook. He's a great guy. He lives down in Texas. And Marshall is crestfallen because Marshall's been trying to be my bodyguard, and I've been telling him, hey, come on, Marshall, we're both soldiers, we're both doing our thing, we're out here risking ourselves. You don't have any. My mom will be just as heartbroken if I get killed as your mom will be if you get killed. I'm not more important than you. Yes, you are, sir. And I'd always turn around and be standing between me and whatever he thought was the most threatening thing out there, right? And so he's crushed. He's got this crushed look on his face. And I realize I'm starting to piece together what happened, and I'm like, where the hell? Why is my rifle not attached to me anymore? Because he hands me my rifle, right? I'm like, what's going on? My carabiner. I see it laying out in the street. What's out in the street? We're kind of undercover now, right? I'm like, I know that by modus operandi, the sniper's gone. He's fired one shot, and he's DD'd out. And I'm like, I want that carabiner. And then I'm thinking about it. This kid's already crushed. If I go risk myself, he's gonna go nuts. So I started to step out to go get the damn thing out of the street. And I stopped. And I'm like, oh, it would kill me. I say, hey, Marshall, sir, go get my carabiner. What? Sir? So, hey, I'm sorry. I wouldn't want you to risk yourself. I'll go get it. And I start to go get it. He throws my ass down on the ground, runs out there, grabs the carabiner. Here's your carabiner, sir. Now get in the damn truck. And we drove back to the fob. We got back to the fob, and my best buddy at the time, about one of my best buddies, was our squadron surgeon. So we have an actual Army medical doctor attached to the squadron. I go to the aid station, and he's in there and, gets me up on a table, tells me, yeah, you're fine, you're not gonna have any major issues, but they're gonna be notifying your wife that you were injured in combat. I have a special cell phone that'll call the States. Call your wife right now. Okay. Call my wife. It's 3 o'clock in the morning in the States, right? So I call my wife, and it's like, hey, sweetie, how you doing? You know, really funny, sound asleep, talking to me on the phone. And I explain, hey, everything's okay, I'm fine, I'm not really hurt, but I kind of got shot a little bit, but it's not a big deal, I'm not seriously injured, I'm going to be able to keep doing my job, I'm not going to have to, you know, come home or anything, but you're going to get notified in the morning, but everything's fine, I'm okay, I'm not seriously hurt. This whole litany, and all I get is, you know, on the other side of the phone. And, you know, I'm like out of it because they gave me some happy juice in my IV, you know, I'm going to go to sleep. And I'm like, all right, I'll talk to you later, honey, click. And she goes to hang up the phone, and we still had conventional corded telephones back then, right? So she tries to hang it up and misses the cradle on the doggone nightstand, drops the phone on the floor. That wakes her up. She's like, what did he just say? Hey! You know, of course, I'm not there. And so it led to a very big, all caps kind of email the next morning. But she got it sorted out, and you know, when the government called to notify her, she had kind of worked her way through it and was doing okay. It was an exciting moment for a woman alone in Fort Hood, Texas, you know.
Sure.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, I think about my experience, and I think about the people that didn't have my experience. I mean, there were 6 guys shot on October 2nd, 2006 in Baghdad by snipers. Me, another guy took a round in the arm, and 4 guys got killed. And, you know, so 6 people got notified, and nobody got the notification that my wife got that was, hey, everything's fine. You know, the one guy got his arm tore up, and the other 4 people never got to see their husband or father or son or loved one ever again. So it's kind of, it's a big thing.
Things in a little perspective.
Yeah.
So your other incident dealing with the IUB? Or the...
So IEDs, I want to mention, oh man, I got to think of his name. I got to think of his name.
How far apart are these incidents?
Weeks. I mean, I don't know. When?
Close,
yeah. Well, I mean, so I was doing combat ops from May forward. I think by June I'd gotten hit by the first IED. I don't remember the date. And then, you know, we wrapped up combat ops in December. So I mean, October was pretty much right in the middle. But I got to think of this guy's name for a second. Corporal Ahrens, Josh Ahrens. So Corporal Josh Ahrens was our gunner on my truck. And in the first IED blast that we encountered, he was rendered unconscious. And, you know, I was fine. I didn't get any TBI, didn't get knocked out, I didn't have a headache, ringing ears, nothing. The armor on the Humvee was good for me, but he was up in the turret, you know, which just had a thin piece of glass and had some open air exposure to the blast wave, and it knocked him out, completely out. Scared the hell out of us. We thought he was dead, you know. I mean, elbow him, hey Gunner, you okay? And he goes, blah, in the middle of the floor of the Humvee, and it jumped on him, and we took off for the hospital and got him evaluated, and he was okay. Concussion. And you know, we know a lot more now about the concussion from an IED blast and the severity of it and what it can do to your brain. We didn't know it then, but second time, we got into a coordinated ambush. We got hit by one IED on the right and one IED on the left. Bam, bam, just like that. And Marshall had this, you know, I looked up at him, you know, I want to see if he's okay again, and he's got this, you know, big, wide-eyed look on him, but he's fighting. I mean, we're in a fight, and he's shooting back and stuff, and I'm telling a Humvee driver where to go and reporting and telling a patrol where to go and what to do. And we pulled over for a second. I'm like, all right, just stop for just a second. I just need a second. Okay, what are we going to do? We saw some guys over there. We're going to go chase them. So we start moving the Humvees over this way, and you know, Ahrens is up there, you know, get out of the way, and he's yelling to people on the ground. He's got his rifle up, and he's looking for people and stuff, trying to figure out what's going on. And we finally got to a building, and I'm like, all right, I'm pretty sure that building, somebody was shooting at us from that building, so we're going to clear that building. And of course, the guy was long gone. We go in, we clear the building, there's nothing in there. We come back out. Like, hey, Ahrens, call squadron and tell them whatever the hell I told him. And he looks down at me with these glazed over eyes and goes, medic, you know, help out Ahrens, he's knocked out again. So, you know, he'd been reconcussed, and this is, you know, weeks, at least weeks later, maybe 4, 5, 6, I don't know. And the second time that happened, I had an inkling that concussions were a lot bigger deal. And even though he was not physically injured, I absolutely insisted on making sure that he got written up for Purple Heart for that, and for an ARCOM with V device, which is the lowest level of valor award that we give, because the guy had been rendered unconscious, or incoherent at least, and he eventually passed out on the way to the hospital a second time. But he was still doing his job. He was still trying to fight back. He was still shooting back, returning fire on the enemy after the blast, and continued to fight through a disabling injury. And I figured that was pretty valorous when he could have, quite legitimately just fallen down into the Humvee and succumbed to his, And I don't know what happened to him. He shot me I never talked to him after that deployment, really. And then he shot me a message on Facebook and thanked me for what he had, for the write-up and for the words that I had said. And he said that those really helped him, coping with what he was coping with. He didn't specify. I mean, I can only assume. But he created a Facebook account just to send me that message, and he deleted the account. And I've never been able to find him or get in touch with him since. And I know that somewhere around the time that he did this, I later learned our driver off of our truck, a kid named Schnook. At the time, he was I think he was a PFC. He made it all the way to sergeant first class, and then in 2014 he killed himself. And I'd really like to know that Aarons is still alive. I don't know if I'll be able to find him, but I have looked a couple of times. I'm not really sure how to really mobilize resources and look for that kind of thing, but I'd like to know that that kid's still alive. And I'd like to connect with him and tell him how much I appreciate the job he did for us. So, for me personally, and for the guys on our truck crew, and for the rest of the guys in the squadron. He was Aarons was a kid from LA that got caught stealing cars, like a Fast and the Furious kind of thing, and he got given the choice of, join the Army or go to jail. And he chose to join the Army, and he was fairly proud of, what he had kind of turned himself into, and I'd like to hope anyway that some of that endured.
So all this is within that 2005,
it's
2006
all 2005,
timeframe.
2006, yeah.
And you did your 13-month tour there. When you left, where did you go from there?
Back to Fort Hood, Texas.
And
I was at Fort Hood for about a year, and then went to Fort Irwin, the National Training Center in California, and I was the XO out there of the entire OPFOR regiment, the 11th Armored Cavalry. Fairly proud. I like that. I'm a Black Horse guy. Very, very proud of having served in the 11th ACR, and served under a great guy. Learned a lot from Paul Laughlin. Retired as a 1-star. And during that, we were out there for 3 years. My family was there for 3 years. I was there for 2. So I got to deploy to Afghanistan on the counterinsurgency and advisory team, working, fairly closely with the very senior level of the ISAF headquarters, figuring out what our guys were doing, what they were doing right, what they were doing wrong. It was a very unusual deployment. About 10 months. I spent some time at Bagram. I spent some more time in Kabul, and then I got to run around all over Afghanistan, a couple of different places, a couple of different times.
2007, 8, 2008?
No, this is more like 2010 now. 2010. So I was at Fort Irwin for a couple of years before this happened. And so I did some interesting things. I went out with the Polish forces once. That was pretty cool. Did some combat patrols with those guys. Weird thing for a guy trained in the Cold War, right? So we trained during the Cold War. I grew up as a tanker in the Cold War, and we used to train in our gunnery simulators. The silhouette of a Hind D helicopter was something we shot at, right? And we took a trip with the Polish guys, and they're flying escort with one of these dang big gunships. These big, Soviet-era gunships flying escort on our helicopter while we're going out. I got some photographs of that. It was pretty funny. But the 2010 deployment was interesting, and then I went back again.
How long were you deployed there?
That was a 10-month. That was a 10-month, I think. Yeah. And then I did an 8-month deployment to Afghanistan. About 2 years later, I went down to Fort Polk, Louisiana, as a battalion commander to train combat advisor teams. And in the middle of my time training combat advisor teams, they took me and said, "Now you're going to go be a combat advisor. Here's your team. Off you go to Afghanistan." And we were in Kunar province, about 9 kilometers from where they filmed Restrepo. So right there in a very bad part of town in northeastern Afghanistan.
That was getting a lot of press at the time.
It was.
What were you assigned to do there?
I
What
was
were you doing?
I was the team lead of the advisor team working with the OCCP, and I'm gonna have to remember what the hell OCCP stands for. But it was a regional coordination center, but supposedly anyway, between the police and the army and the other Afghan forces that were operating in the province. Something coordination center provincial, but I was actually on the ground when Lieutenant Florent Groberg, the event for which he was awarded the Medal of Honor, which was fairly traumatic. That was probably the longest day of my life, because I was in charge of the FOB, and that was. So we had a bunch of VIPs fly in. My brigade commander, the Afghan brigade commander. Another U.S. brigade commander, so the advisor team brigade that I'm a part of. So both of my brigade commander bosses are in this patrol, and they come to my FOB that I'm in charge of, and they land there. And there's about a 300-meter stretch of road between us and the provincial governor's palace that is of questionable, obviously, security status. And we had made this routine walk a number of times, and typical doctrine would say, hey, make the walk a different way a couple of times. Well, there literally was not another physical way to go. And so we had gotten a little bit complacent probably, and I don't know how much of this accrues to me as a responsible party, but I feel bad about it. But we didn't, we talked about it. We'd all talked about it internally, and how could we break this up? How could we do it differently? We hadn't come up with anything. And these guys came in for a VIP meeting with the governor. That's something we did frequently, and they got templated, and a pair of suicide vest guys infiltrated into the patrol and blew themselves up. Well, the lucky part was that the second suicide vest guy must have had his thumb on the trigger when the first guy went off, because he went off bang and he hadn't come around the corner yet. So it's sort of a entirely fortuitous, premature moment there for him. But the first guy did enough damage for both. He had gotten into the patrol. The lieutenant had figured out this guy is not right. Something I got to get at. I got to stop him. And the lieutenant was moving forward, I think, with his arm out or something, and he had hit the guy, and was in the immediate proximity of this guy, but had fallen to one side or something, so he wasn't in the fragmentation zone of the blast thing stuck to this guy's chest, which basically just shot fragments in one big direction like that as it blew the guy to pieces. And it hit the patrol. It killed 5 guys outright, and then wounded like 13 or something. I mean, some crazy number of people were wounded to one degree or another. So Colonel Walrath was badly wounded. His Sergeant Major, God, don't make this public, I can't remember the guy's name right now, but pretty traumatic, because I was drinking near beer and smoking cigars with the Sergeant Major the night before, Griffin. He was killed, and I saw his body on the ground, and I didn't recognize him. It was horrible to realize that was this. I had a lot of affinity for him because he's an armor guy like me. We're in an infantry brigade, not a lot of armor guys. And I saw him lying on the ground, and I saw him dead, and I didn't know it was him. But they were packing up casualties when I got there. I was already at the governor's palace, so I'm like 100 meters away. There's this horrendous bang, and I throw on my gear, grab my guys, and we go running down. We arrived, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 minutes after the thing actually happened. And what do you do, right? The suicide bomber guy's dead. There's not any follow-up attack. You're cleaning up the pieces and pulling security and trying to get people out of there. That's what we did. We medevac people. We had put extra security on patrol. We had the cook NCO from our FOB. We only had 40 guys on the FOB. The cook NCO was on patrol, and he had helped out, and he was out there pulling security. He's loading badly wounded guys in Skedcos into the MRAPs to get them out of there to the Forward Surgical Team Hospital in the town, and then we had the Afghan Army guys came down with a pickup truck, and they were loading guys that are walking wounded, essentially, to help them just drive them the 100-200 meters back up to the FOB to get them to the aid station. Well, and he's up there, and he gets in the aid station, this cook NCO does, and he's helping out and doing all this stuff. Well, senior NCO there looks at him and says, "Hey, Sergeant, you got a lot of blood on your leg. Is that yours?" "Oh, no, I'm good." "No, seriously, are you sure?" come on, Sergeant, that is that your blood? Sit down in a chair. No, I'm good, I'm okay. And he's trying to help out and trying to keep going with these other guys that are badly wounded, you know. Sit down, Sergeant, now. Takes a pair of scissors, sure enough, shrapnel wound clean through his calf. In one end, out the other. I mean, you know, right through the meat. Worked right through it. Second time I got to write a Valor Award. Couldn't help myself, you know. I mean, he's going to get the Purple Heart anyway, he's wounded, but I mean, you know, I wanted to make sure that people knew that this guy wouldn't quit, you know. Absolutely, he's wounded. He could lay down and take a knee. No. He's helping out people who are more. I mean, we had a guy right next to him, you know, with a tourniquet on each leg because he's, you know, going to bleed to death. We don't take care of him. And yeah, it was a long day.
Sounds like a long day, long painful day.
Yeah, brigade. Well, I could say more. I'll keep some of it, but you know, it was a long day.
Yeah.
It was a very hard, of all the deployments I did, that was perhaps the most frustrating. You know, we're working on a FOB. We're not out amongst them. We're trying to work a coordination center kind of job. We didn't do a lot of. It's not us in the lead, but we're at risk. And I didn't see, you know, with Iraq, I could kind of see, hey, these people were a pretty advanced country. They want to get back to it. They're really pissed off that we're here, and would like us to leave, but they really want to put their country back together again. Well, you know, Afghanistan's not like that. Afghanistan's, you know, analogous to, you know, an 11th century populace with modern weapons and communications equipment. I mean, it's really understanding Afghan culture. I'm not trying to denigrate them. They're great people, but their mindset hasn't like moved into the modern world. They're subsistence farmers, and they still think in the terms of, you know, the relationships more similarly to, you know, people from an earlier time. And you can't really wrap your head around that as a modern person. They don't identify themselves as Afghans. They identify themselves as people from this locality or this province. And most of them can't read and write. And really trying to change people like that is very, very difficult, and they resent it with you know, understandable reason. They, you know, most cultures want to become advanced, you know, through gradual contact and exposure and slowly changing their own internal dynamics and stuff themselves. And when we try to inflict that on people, it creates a problem.
Yeah. So you were how long were you in Afghanistan at that?
That was an 8-month tour.
8 months.
Yeah. It's in FOB Fayez in Asadabad, which is the provincial capital.
So you returned about 2011?
That was 2012, sorry.
Okay, 2012.
The one in Kabul and Bagram, where I was on the advisor team, was 2010, and this one was 2012.
Okay, so there's about 2 years between the two.
Yeah.
And where did you return to?
Fort Polk, Louisiana. That's where my training battalion was.
Did you spend most of the rest of your time there, or how long?
I finished up at Fort Polk in 2013 and moved to Yorktown, Virginia, and was working in TRADOC headquarters at Fort Eustis for the last 3.5, I guess, years of my military career before I retired.
Uh-huh.
I was working in TRADOC in ARCIC, in fact, Army Capability Integration Center. Did a lot of work with the general in charge of ARCIC, who was, you know, famously for a period of time the National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster. I helped him complete the Army's combat vehicle modernization strategy, which was kind of fun, and gave me a lot of experience that I'm using today as a consultant. So
that sounds good. Are there any stories or anything that we haven't touched upon that during your career?
Only about 100. But I mean, you know, I told you the ones that center around me because those are the ones that I tell, you know, over a beer or whatever. But yeah,
we want the ones that were about you.
Well, there's so many others and so many other people that you touch on and come to know, and you hear their stories, and you know, you think about, hey, a lot of things happen to me, but I know people that did things that, you know, make anything I did look like peanuts.
Yeah.
To me anyway, you know, or to people who were there. I know guys that were far junior to me that had such more insightful thoughts about things, you know, when I find myself just thinking in a straight path.
Yeah.
I know so many funny things. You know, I mean, I told you a story about me getting ridiculously lucky one way. I know, baby, there were people that got ridiculously unlucky. You know, humorous story. I mean, a guy got shot by the same damn sniper and it hit him in the buttock and it went across his butt. You got a horizontal scar across both buttocks, which is, you know, laughable now, but it wasn't laughable at the time. It was a pretty serious injury, but you know.
Good story for the rest of life, yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody associated.
But I mean, you know, I guess the hardest part about looking back on it as an officer is that, you know, the more you realize where you could have done something different or where you could have said something different or that people were, you know, looking to me for leadership in doubtful times and how could I have done better. I mean, there's a lot of self-doubt that comes into it. I'm not guilty, I don't think.
Yeah.
But I know that there's a lot of places I could have done a lot better. And it to this day, I wish that I had. And I did pretty well. I'm proud of the things I did. I mean, I spent 10 years of my life. I was ready to get out when 9/11 happened. I was ready to get out. I had a plan. I was trying to become a commercial airline pilot. Owned an airplane, was flying, getting ratings. That's why I'm here at an air show, right? Because I love planes, even though I'm a tank officer, right? But, you know, 9/11 happens like, hey, the Army needs me. I've prepared 10 years, all of my life really, to do this job, and I've been frustrated because we never got to do it for real, and now we're going to go do it for real. And it's not bloodthirst, it's just wanting to do the actual job that you trained your professional life for. And guess what? I was not bad at it.
Yeah.
Might not have been perfect, but I was not bad at it, and I'm proud of that.
Yeah. There's not an officer ever served in any military that hasn't certainly relived some of the decisions they made. You know, but you do the best you can and hope that was good enough.
Yeah. You know, you look back, have you ever read Once an Eagle?
No.
Anton Myrer? Okay, that's the classic work about professional Army officership. It's a novel, and it follows the career paths of two guys, fictional characters. Damon something is the guy that's really connected with the soldier, and Courtney Massengale is the paper officer. You know, the guy that's just trying to check the blocks and achieve higher rank and you know, at any cost, the backstabbing ladder climber. And the contrast between the two, and you go back and you ask yourself, what was your motivation throughout your career? Where did you do things that you could have done differently? What decisions and choices did you make? How selfless was your service? How focused on your soldiers were you? You know, and it's never perfect. You know, you wish that it was. So.
One last question. Obviously, you're in the middle of a new career. What benefits of your military career? Like if you were telling someone, your children, grandchildren down the road, what are you most proud of your military career? And how does your military career help you prepare for what you're doing now in your new career?
Well, the transition to my new career is really difficult for me because, you know, there's certain things you don't have to worry about. You go into business anyway. That's what I chose to do, and there's so much doubt about things that in the military were certain. You know, monthly paycheck. You know. But just purpose and what you're doing. You know, there's a guy on your right, guy on your left that are peers. Guys above you, your seniors. There's guys that are not as high ranking as you that either are subordinates or just, you know, people that you work with, and everybody has a hierarchical relationship and a degree of respect for everybody. And it's completely absent in the civilian world. It's very difficult. But number one, it's kind of difficult because, of course, what I'm doing is defense consulting. So, you know, without my military career, I literally would not be doing what I'm doing now at all. But I think that the you know, people say that there's only one kind of discipline, and that's self-discipline. And you do learn that in the Army. You know, you think that they're inflicting discipline upon you, but at the end of the day, all discipline is a choice. Whether you're submitting to external source of discipline or an internal one, you're still disciplining yourself to do things that you would not otherwise naturally do. And to do it in a committed and prompt fashion. And that, above all else, probably is what I would say, you take away from a career in the military is that, you have a personal expectation, you have expectations of yourself and expectations of others, and the commitment to get those things done is what will make you successful in any venture you choose.
Proud that you had a good long military career?
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I am.
don't have anything else unless you have anything else?
No, I'm done. This didn't take a half an hour though. My wife's going to kill me.
Thank you very much for your service and your interview.
You're welcome.